So I want to sort of pose a few questions and get you guys' take, and then open it up for comment or question from the audience. And so one of the things that I think is interesting is why, as these platforms, go to this contributor model, what is the incentive for people like us who are, particularly you and I, who are non-journalists and really non-writers? When I started my company in 2007, the only thing I'd ever really written were research papers to get through college and English papers and such, and never really didn't seek writing as a career or as a way to express myself. And so when I was asked to write a column for Inc. after our business was fairly successful, it became an exercise for me to, as I started doing it more often, to think through some of my problems and my issues, and actually became a really cathartic exercise for me to solve some of the problems that I was dealing with in the business. And that's why I've done it more, and I've continued to do it throughout the last few years. But it's a question I'd like to ask you guys. Why do contributors do it? Why did you start doing it? And what does it do for you? And how does it help you?
Sure. So in between some of my tech companies that I was building and scaling, I was also a tech journalist, so print and television, although without any formal training. So first of all, thanks for having me here, because I finally get to go to a J school. So, so I'm pretty glad to be here. But as a contributor, so I started my software consulting business which is my current venture, about 6 years back. And it's an incredibly competitive industry. It's a competitive space. It's a competitive business to be in. There are thousands of software consulting businesses that we kind of compete with. Sure, we do have our niche, but even within our niche, we would be, competing with over 100, different companies. So how do you stand out? How do you build credibility? And more so importantly, when you're starting out in the early stages, when you're fresh out the boat. And I've been a product entrepreneur, and I'm doing a software consulting business for the first time. Sure enough, from one of the challenges that I faced in my previous businesses, so we can go out and get the initial bit of traction, the initial bit of business, but how do you scale that to a much larger audience? You have to build a sales strategy, but then what differentiates you from some of your competitors? So that's where writing for some of the publications, it helps you build thought leadership, build that credibility, build that trust. Now, we have an entire sales funnel. We map out the entire buyer's journey and try and address some of the most pressing questions that our potential customers have, some of the objections that they have, and then engage them in those conversations. Our sales cycle is, of course, much longer as a consulting business, unlike some of the product businesses, which are looking at content from translating directly into subscription. We're looking at our content strategy as gaining credibility and starting conversations with our prospective customers, adding value to them. So eventually, it does help in converting better for our business, not so much as driving traffic, but really striking those conversations, engaging with them, and then eventually converting.
Yeah. On our end, usually a lot of people come to us for exposure. So to give you a little bit of a who's in the market lesson in Salt Lake, there's another paper, there are a handful of TV stations, a handful of radio stations. In our newsroom, we have a TV station, a radio station, a print operation, and they also have their own website. And then our website exists as well. We have a larger reach than anyone in the state in terms of numbers. Our website does, and we have a classifieds operation that kind of helps bring people to our website. And so a lot of it is just exposure, but some of it also is just getting getting practice, getting more established. Everyone wants to be a writer, as a lot of us have learned. And so this is a way for them, a low risk way for them to kind of get their name out there and get some practice and get some feedback from professionals.
What does it do for the publication?
For us, our team specifically, so we share a brand with TV and radio, but we're semi-autonomous. So our writing team, we have 2.5 writers. One person manages our website half the week. So it gives us content that we don't have access to otherwise. We do get content from print and from TV and radio, but there's still, as you guys know, there are always stories out there and always niches that are needing to be filled. And so it gives us content that we aren't going to get, especially from subject area experts. It's interesting, and you make it clear if it's an opinion piece or not, but it's a lot more compelling to learn something from someone who's an expert in that area than it is from someone who's maybe just trying to cobble something together without much expertise.
Any contributors out there have any more to add about why they do it, or what do they get out of it? Any? John?
I think for me, it's about building trust. I think that I think marketing and communication has changed these last 10 years, especially from brands to individuals, is that it used to be how much I can sell you, how much I can advertise to you so you buy my product. And for me, it's like a commitment that I think myself and Kelsey have as a company, is that we want the people that we're interacting with to trust us. And the best way to do that is through education and helping them become better. And so for me, it's the best way that I've been able to see from brands and companies, or one of the best ways to build trust with the audience, so that they not only want to buy from you, but they actually feel like you actually give a shit about them, that you care about them and want them to be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess in a lot of ways, there's also a sense of vulnerability that in putting yourself out there, which I've actually found pretty interesting, and the engagement I get from it, and the comments and the questions. I mean, it actually has led, I think, to other business, because people see you as real. They see you as somebody that's got the same issues that they do. So it's, for my business, it's really been helpful in that way. So, so one of the issues that I hear a lot about from publications and sort of as you talk to people is that the quality of the content isn't always great and relevant to people. But so wanted to talk about how publications can sort of manage the content better. How can they help contributors improve the content? One of the things that I've found at Inc. is that they do a very good job at analytics. We know what posts are working. We know what headlines are working better. They actually do monthly sort of training and talks with the contributors to improve the content, improve what they're doing. What can publications do, I guess, is the question, to help you as a contributor do better?
Sure. I think when you're starting out, you have tons and tons of ideas that you want to write for, but you may have great content, but if nobody's reading them, there's really no value in it, right? So one of the things is really to find that audience, right? So maybe some sort of an involvement where we're picking out, having an eyeball on some of good quality content and leveraging their network to help contributors also gain that bit of visibility and bit of audience, because at the end of the day, they are writing to put themselves in front of their target audiences.
Okay.
And one of the other things that you also mentioned in terms of Inc. So also leveraging some of their editorial experience to help in terms of the content itself, maybe the structure, bounce off ideas, let's say talk about titles, right. So some of those things, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think editing titles would be helpful, since titles really make a big difference in getting the content seen. And that's something that I know a lot of people are that's a weak area that I suffer from that. But do you have any?
Yeah. So
from that side?
our content generation platform has a track changes feature, and so that's one thing that person can have automatically, is just see what changes we made from beginning to end. The other thing is we try to have our editors. One is every piece of, which I don't know if this is across the board. This is true of everyone across the board, but for our team, everything has to go through a senior editor before it goes online. So some of our writers will manage some of the contributors, but a senior editor actually needs to look at it before it goes online. I was telling these guys about a kind of an awkward situation we got into with a contributor who does a lot of lifestyle and a lot of like, you can do this, you're valuable, which, you know, is great and it feels really good. She veered into a domestic violence Q&A situation, and she kind of veered into some victim blaming language, and it got to be pretty bad and pretty, we rarely take down posts, but we took that down just because it was such a damaging message to someone who's potentially being abused. So from that experience, we learned, like, one, we need to keep them in their area of expertise. They can't veer out from their area of expertise. Yeah, they have to stay in their lane. But also we from that realized we needed to have a more experienced set of eyes on it to watch for some of these potential red flags and to make sure that those things don't get onto our website. But yeah, so a lot of it is just one-on-one. And some of these are actually really good suggestions that we want to incorporate now, hearing from you too. But we just do a lot of case-by-case, one-on-one coaching as we get things.
How do you scale that though?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
as you grow your contributor network, it's difficult to kind of scale that, right? Having
Yeah.
those eyeballs, because you need more number of those.
Particularly with a small shop.
Yeah, that's a great question. we haven't hit that yet. It's been manageable for us so far. We have 4 people and myself who do editing on a regular basis, and so we've been able to scale it for now. Our contributor network isn't massive at this point, so we've been able to manage it. But that's a question we're actually asking right now: is how are we going to scale this moving forward? How is this sustainable? I would assume it would look something like, if you don't hit a certain number on our metric scale by a certain amount of time, then we need to move on and find a new contributor. But I don't know yet. I don't have that answer yet.
I think to add to that question or that conversation, you know, from multiple platforms that I've worked with, there's very little feedback. So once the post is gone and out of my hands, all I can see are the likes, right? And it doesn't give me any idea of really how that post is doing compared to others. You know, it doesn't give me any feedback how it's done on social media. And so I think that's one of the things I think would be helpful from our standpoint, would be just a little bit more data and a little bit more feedback on how the posts are doing. And I think that's something that's missing from the contributor side right now, is sort of feedback.
Yeah, I know. Also in our content generation system, it's not perfect, but it gives you an idea. They do page views for each platform. Okay. We syndicate as well, so it'll put in those numbers. But if it goes on KSL.com, it will show you roughly the amount of people whose eyes are on your stuff on our site.
That's good.
But yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, that's maybe something the other publications could build into their software, but that's something we have right now.
Yeah, something I was going to ask, it might be for some people in the crowd too, is that, like, you make a good point, right, is that, like, when I'm contributing, a lot of times you just don't know, and you're not shared. You're like, for example, is it a newsletter? Okay, so it's like she was talking about one of her important metrics is returning people to the site and things like that. Like, I don't know that, and I think that's a lot with publications right now, is that they have data and information that I don't know, like, why. I can understand certain elements of why they don't want to share certain data, but at the same time, is that if I knew things like that, I would look at what posts had returning customer or returning
Right.
visitors, or ones that, you know, said, hey, I want to start paying attention to this content, downloaded the email list or the newsletter. So that's something that
It would help you write I mean, if you see something that's popular and topical, or you know, that people are responding to, then it gives you that data to be able to put out more content like that.
Yeah, and I'm not to even say it would completely influence it. Like, we should obviously write with, you know, what we're passionate about, what's in our lane, and things like that. But I think it would help a lot, and it's a huge deficiency in that economy or that relationship there. Is that anytime somebody's trying to get content that's engaging to your audience, and you don't get the feedback that's needed, it's very hard for us to kind of meet those goals, to be honest with you. That's kind of how I feel on a pretty consistent basis.
I mean,
as long as we're in the trust circle here.
no, even to the degree of what time to post, what days to post, those kind of things are really helpful. So, and even more so, I was thinking about this morning, helping design social media around your post, right? Not all of us are great at sort of crafting the message for social, and so looking at, sort of a strategy around each post and seeing if when the best times to really promote those posts would be really helpful.
Or not every contributor is also a marketer, right? So,
Right.
Helping them with that side of.
Right. Agreed. Any other thoughts or? No. Okay. Hard to interrupt lunch, right? So one question I was thinking of is, by embracing this model, as more and more platforms go to this model, is it sort of the beginning or of the end for traditional journalism? What do you guys think?
I think it depends. That's the answer to most.
For paid reporters, for paid.
Yeah, so some of our contributors are paid. So that's it's just on a case-by-case basis. So that's some of it as well. I think we label whether it's a contributor or whether it's from another outlet, just so people know where the information is coming from. But the way that, the way that we try to do it is we try to make it into as close to a news piece as possible. So for us, it's just an extension of what we're doing, and we're trying to train people of, you need balance, you need another source, you need verification, and so for us, we're trying to make it more of an extension. I know that's not always a practice everywhere, but we face, because we're in a newsroom with a lot of legacy platforms, we face a lot of pressure to maintain that journalistic integrity, which is great. And that makes it sound like it's a bad thing. It's a great thing. But any misstep is also very closely watched. And so we try very hard to keep it within the lane of journalism where we can.
What do you think?
Being on the other side as well, yeah. I think there's a thin line. So it's not that one model is going to outdo the other model. I think both have enough scope to survive, and thrive together. It's just finding that middle ground, because while journalists are working with their editors more closely, contributors don't necessarily have that as well. So how do you maintain that quality? How do you maintain those eyeballs and the content that the larger mass of contributors that are contributing on your platform? Because at the end of the day, that content is reflective of that publication itself.
Right. Anybody else want to wade into that?
I guess I have a half-formed thought, which is dangerous. I'm thinking of Ken's opening, and one of the points he hit was the issue of quality, especially at some regional publications. And how do you attract an audience if you don't have quality content? And I think that's a huge danger and risk for the industry right now. And then I'm thinking about the freelance panel and the issues of getting paid for your work. And then here we are with contributors, and it reminds me a little bit of some of the discussions about the link economy. We all link to each other and like, okay, but money has to change hands someplace, right? Or we won't survive.
Go ahead.
Well, the informed thought is, how do we close that loop? You have a benefit, it helps your business. The organization gets a variety of voices and expertise, so that's all good. Where does the money change hands in a way that we then have sustainable models, I guess?
Right. That's a good question. I don't know.
I know for us, some of our contributors are former employees, so they are journalists in a past life. So some of, and maybe we're not seeing money change hands necessarily, but they know how to write the way that we need them to write, and they also people have familiarity with their names, their bylines, their content. So that's been helpful for us, as we already have name and brand recognition. And so that just builds on an already existent reputation. So that's, at least our paid contributors, most of them are former employees on the higher tier. We have different tiers of pay. But that's some of it. And we've realized to get good content, a lot of times we have to pay for it. Other people have bigger names than we do, so they maybe wouldn't have to pay for it. And some people just really want to get their name out there, so they don't mind not getting paid. I'm sure they'd take money if they knew it was available, I guess. But yeah, so I think that's part of it is we usually work on, either we're selective one, but we also work with people who we already know how to work with them. So that makes the relationship easier and makes the whole process easier, but also still maintains that trust, hopefully.
What do you look for in a contributor? What qualities?
Yeah,
Is there a threshold for?
I should probably like FaceTime the people on my team who actually like pick the contributors and have them answer this question. So we have different sections. So it's not just one person dealing with contributors, it's the outdoors person dealing with outdoors contributors and probably similar elsewhere. So I think a lot of it, what I would look for is, are they a good storyteller and are they accurate? And that's something I'm trying to distill down to my team. I know that this one guy wrote this story about police technology, which could have been interesting, but it ended up being like a 1,500 word, really dry, like, here's the stuff that police use, just like listing it out in like paragraph format. And it was so boring. And, I turned to the writer, and she's new, and she was the one who approved it. And I said, it's okay if you say no. Like, we're already down the lane on this, and I guess I'll run it. And usually we're a little bit more selective. And I was like, it's okay if you push back and you say, this isn't a good piece of content, and not to be mean to them, but to help them learn. And I was like, one, it's a waste of your time, but two, it's a waste of our time, and it's a waste of the writer's time. And so that's the training we're doing. I have a little bit newer of a work base. A lot of them are pretty new out of college. And so that's kind of the struggle, is they just want everyone they know how it feels, and so they want everyone to get published, and they want everyone to feel important. But what I look for is, do they know what they're talking about, and can they tell a good story within that? And are they willing to play within the rules of journalism?
Okay.
I've got a question.
Yes.
So yesterday, to pick up on what you were saying, Dave, some of the folks who were on Bob's panel talked about hustling and the fact that as journalists they feel like now they have to hustle. So my question is, do you feel like you're hustling? Or do you feel like you're just being good at business? And the reason that I ask it like that is because I guess as a former journalist, sometimes I think, do we put our business hats on enough? So can you answer that? Do you feel like you're hustling?
I don't, no. Because it's not my livelihood, right? And so I've never felt like I've always felt it was sort of a privilege to do it, and an opportunity to express my thoughts and work through some of my internal problems that I was dealing with. Like I said before, it's very cathartic. I've never really felt pressure. I'm not on a deadline, so and I'm not doing this to eat. So maybe I'm motivated. I'm motivated in a different way.
Yeah, in the business context, for the people who are on the outside and want to become contributing writers for publications, they definitely do see it as a hustle. That's something that I'm hustling. But it's just good business. I mean, it just kind of fits in with the business strategy. End of the day, it is content. We're getting trust with content. We're building credibility. We're building thought leadership. So I think all of that kind of ties in with the business itself.
I mean, the hustle side of it would be how to maximize what I'm doing, like you said, to use it for your business. I put a lot of work into the back end of that. Once something goes up, how do I get it out there? How do I put it across social media? How do I put it out to my network? I mean, I probably spend more energy on that. What I've always found is the more time I spend on writing something, the less eyeballs I get on it. And if I spend 20 or 30 minutes writing a 500-page post, it goes viral. So I don't know why, but that's what happens. Any more questions or thoughts?
Something I was going to ask about quality. This is Jane and Kate. I was off. Sorry, but you talked about quality, and it was talked about yesterday, and this is something that I struggle with. Is like, how do you guys look at quality of content, because it's so subjective. It's so subjective of what the quality of content is. It's ultimately about somebody's needs, and I'll send a piece to whatever, an HBR, and they'll be like, this is crap. And then I send it to someone else, and they're like, this is amazing. Or I struggle with that because it just is so subjective. Like, I've been in Rhett's position so many times where I'm like, I spend so much time on a piece, and people just don't engage with it. My highest viewed engaged article, I spent 15 minutes on. And I'm like, I don't know. And so, like, how do you guys, and it could open up to other people, like, how do you look at quality of content? That's such a subjective thing, and people bring it up all the time.
Yep.
I'm guessing that's for me. I think some of it is performance, but I would say some of my least favorite things to get are already written contributor pieces. I would much rather see a pitch and understand where you're going with it, an idea, so I can help you shape that idea, than to get a fully formed story and then have to work with you from there. So some of it honestly is just a time, like how much time is this going to take me to rework this to what we need. So I think some of it is just finding out, and I know that's, like you said, is subjective, but finding out what they need, finding out what they're looking for, and hitting that niche. That's, at least for me, I think the biggest thing that we run into time issues with are someone will fully write a story and then it just has to be entirely reworked, and that gets to be not conducive for a good time for anyone. I would say I prefer to get ideas first before, unless there's a relationship of trust there and we already have something established and I know you and I know your content and I know what you're going to be getting me. I'd rather get an idea and here's my targeted idea of where I'm going with this. And I think that's where you could maybe refine your pitch, is just preempt it.
I know that, but for me, that's not how I write. I'll go to the coffee shop and in the mornings to get real work done and crank out something that I'm thinking about. And it's not, I didn't know the night before that I was going to write about this particular subject, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not something that I've thought out. It's something that's sort of just this brain dump of thought and maybe some research, maybe some phone calls. But so that I think that's sort of where some of this is too. I know that my editor at CNBC is very frustrated with me because I just send him stuff. And he's like you. I think he wants probably a concept and an outline of what I'm going to write.
Yeah, and I think some of it too,
can't tell
though,
him because
is going back to relationships, like we've been talking about this whole time. If I know you and I know generally what direction you're going to go in, then that's a different situation than if I don't know you and it's just something, or if your style's just so different every time that I don't know what to expect, then that gets to be difficult. But if it's a pretty consistent, here's what I know to expect from Rhett, or here's what I know to expect from John, or here's what I know to expect from Celeste, you know, that
because of trust, I guess.
Yeah,
too.
that you have that established over time. But especially if it's someone new, if you're starting anew, I'd rather have a concept, which is hard because they also probably want to see at least how you can write and what you can write. But it's a lot easier for us to start with the concept and then move on from there.
So from my perspective, we're building content that is really addressing our audience's questions that they're asking, the objections that they have, things that they're looking for, when they're doing their research. Does it really address those questions? Does it really satisfy their need by reading that content? So for us, it's very important that content really sticks with them. So end of the day, it also kind of comes down to the quality, because, if the quality is not good, it's not going to satisfy my need, because I'm running my business at the end of the day, and I need to answer those questions for my prospective customer. So we measure that by means of how much engagement we get. Are we getting feedback, real feedback from the audience, direct feedback? So for instance, I wrote an article, I think 2 or 3 years back, on software patents, but from the business side, and I still get emails on that. And people come and they ask questions, and that just gets on conversation. So I know that content works, and it is great quality because it is starting a dialogue with the audience that I'm working with.
And I would say too, so an analogy, I have a friend who's a middle school history teacher, bless her heart, and she said that she said, I would like to say I pay the same amount of attention to every student. And she said, but unfortunately, she said, if a parent comes in and talks to me, they're at the top of my mind because that parent came in and talked to me. And she said, I still try to, pay attention, but because I now have that sticky in my head, I'm paying more attention to that kid. And I would say the same for contributors or even writers on my team, that obviously everyone wants feedback and you try and give feedback, but if someone approaches us proactively and says, I want to become better, what do you need differently from me, or what can I do to help you with your publication, or how can I craft this better so there's more engagement? It's a lot then you're sticky. And then we're able to work with you and say, okay, this person really wants feedback and they're going to value the feedback I'm giving them and they're going to do something with it. And so that makes it also helps with the quality is just knowing, I know that sounds simple, but if we know you're interested in improving, it makes us easier to help you improve.
So the other question I would have is, what seems to work better with you? I mean, you were just talking about sort of an evergreen content that is relevant years down the road. What seems to work better for you as a writer and you as a publication? Is it the evergreen content or is it the timely content that the contributors are writing? Or is it more, are contributors doing more evergreen than, as opposed to more news, more relevant, more new, current stuff?
I think depending on the objective of the contributor itself, right? They might be doing, more evergreen versus the other. So for us, we
What works for you? What's better for you?
yeah, for us, we look at more evergreen content because some of the questions that our
As a business person.
as a business, is that they're asking are common over the years. They don't necessarily change, but then there are some which are very specific to the current landscape. Then of course you have to be a little current. But even with that, there is a potential for that content. It doesn't run out in, let's say, at least in our industry, in the technology space, it doesn't run out in 3 months or 6 months. It lasts for at least 2 to 3 years. So you're still looking at that bit of roadmap.
For us, it depends. With our sports contributors, that we tend to get more timely content, and they seem to have more of a tight-knit relationship there. On the news side, we tend to seek out more evergreen content, and that tends to perform better. But there's also there's so many little nuances, as you all know, in day-to-day reporting and in some of these timely things that it makes it, unless you have a very exactly what you're going to, again, I know this is no surprises, but if you know that this person is a subject area expert or they're able to report or they have a background in reporting, that would maybe open up the door. But right now, especially given our model, that's the best way for us is evergreen. That's easier to vet and easier for us to make sure that they have all their ducks in a row.
I think for me too, I think the evergreen stuff, I find that I get comments years after I've written something, and I feel like for my business, that's better. And I'm probably better at that than I am at writing about current events or something that's happening right now and what impact that'll have. So yeah, I think the evergreen, for me, that's what's been more effective. Any thoughts on what works better in terms of content, evergreen? Yes?
So I just wanted to, kind of circle back to what John was saying about, feedback for contributors and what they like. And I think as somebody who publishes a lot of contributor content, I run the leadership management blog. So it's a specific thing. But even with that, there's subsets of, I want, my audience really cares about communication and managing like the personal aspects of the relationship. So I get a lot of pitches that might be where I'm like, that's great, but I kind of know what my audience is going to like. But what I try to do, and I get a lot of fully written drafts, and I get some pitches in a mix, and that's fine. But what I try to do is get out of, and I find the toughest part on my end is making sure if I'm saying no on something, or I'm pushing back, or I'm saying adjust it, that I'm doing it because I think, well, I know the audience. This is not quite for our audience, as opposed to like, this isn't just my style. And I think that's where sometimes I have to, that's my biggest challenge, is sometimes you're saying, this fits the standard, it's not quite how I would do it, but let me run it anyways, and those usually do better. So, I think that's something where, but, again, as you were saying, the people I give more feedback to are the people who ask for more feedback, and I sometimes try to remember to, like, follow up with folks or, whatever, but there's so much else going on in the day that I think it's not a bad thing to reach out, as a contributor and say, hey, am I hitting the mark, or how did this do, especially if some of the metrics are not as visible, that'll spark me and be like, oh yeah, I should be engaged with that.
That's good advice, yeah.
Yeah, and I think on anyone who's been a writer, writing's kind of an ego thing, and so you all probably know this, but some people don't want feedback, and so you can give feedback, but it gets exhausting if they're fighting back. It's like, I don't want to give you feedback anymore because you're fighting me, and I don't have time for this. So that's some of it too, is you're signaling then to that person, like, I won't fight back. Like I will listen to your feedback, and I'll maybe ask questions to clarify or challenge, but that's a real pressure that we have, is just we don't have time to fight about a story. Like, we just don't. Another thing, just to a previous question on why contributors are good, is it's very cost effective for us. It gives the contributor gets a benefit. I think our 11% of our content is contributor generated, and it's a fraction of the cost of obviously anything else we do, including our newsroom partners, getting content from them. So that's some of it. It's just, I realized I didn't answer that at the beginning, but we do get a lot of content out of it.
Any questions? Yes.
I have a question related to the feedback. I actually was listening to the Radical Candor podcast on the way here earlier this week, and they talked about how the purpose of feedback is not to make someone feel better or worse, but to help them identify what does success look like. And with some of the other comments and discussions about how do we bring this full circle and the missing metrics that you wish that you could have, I'm curious about whether, Rhett and Poole, if you feel like you know what success looks like to your editors, and when an editor is going to read a piece of content and be happy that you sent it to them versus frustrated with you. And for Whitney, if you feel like if kind of intentionally working on identifying what that looks like and communicating that to your contributors is something that is sort of a part of the process of working with contributors.
Yeah, I know when I write something that sucks. Yeah, it's pretty, yeah, I know it. But going back to what we said earlier, sometimes that's that piece that gets attention. And maybe I'm a bad judge of that. I don't know. I know that there's stuff that I write that I'm happier about and more proud of, and maybe it doesn't get as many views, but it's a topic that was important to me, and it helped me. So I think, and hopefully can help somebody else. So, I mean, the answer is yes. I think we all know when we do a good job or a bad job, whether we want to admit it or not, is one thing. And sometimes it's the bandwidth. I don't have the bandwidth to fix it, right? I don't have the, I can always I look at something too much and I tear it apart and I tear it apart. I'm working on something right now that I've been working on for weeks, and it's, I just can't make it any better. And it gets worse and worse. So, so I can overanalyze it. But I think we do. Yeah, I think you do. But I do try to have a standard, and I do try to do the best I can with it.
Do I know whether a content is really going to work or not? Probably not. So I'd really appreciate, an editor working with me, giving some bit of feedback. Far more experience they have, and of course, having worked as a journalist also with editors, I've gone through that process, so I understand how that actually helps craft a better piece. But then I think we're also, I'm also in the common, place, sometimes spending hours and days putting together content, and that just doesn't do well at all, right? So,
and you don't have time.
And you're surprised, yeah, why it doesn't. And sometimes something that you put together in an hour or so, and that goes viral. So sometimes you don't know that. And then also, different contributors are differently integrated into the ecosystem of a publication. So the same publication may have some contributors that they're vetting their articles, they are working more intensely with them, and then the same publication will also have contributors that have direct access to publishing the content. So maybe they've gained the trust, maybe they've gotten in sync with the style guide or the way that publication works. So over a period of time, also it comes down to the time that one has, right? Do you even have that bandwidth to kind of work with publication to keep improving on the content? If you're probably working with one publication, maybe. But if you're contributing to multiple publications, it gets challenging. For instance, I write for 4 publications. almost on a weekly basis. So that's 4 pieces of content a week to produce.
time.
So yeah, it takes time. Yeah.
I don't know that we have as robust of a system in place as I would like. I started as news director a year ago, so I've been focusing on my writers and so that they know what success looks like. I haven't been focusing so much on contributors, so it's a great suggestion. I'm a big fan of clear metrics and clear performance goals, so that's an awesome suggestion. But I mean, obviously, we have technical things that we definitely have that in place that meet AP style, make sure it's technically accurate, make sure the story makes sense, make sure it's a good story. But beyond that, we don't have something in place right now. But it's a great suggestion.
Yeah. Yes.
I have 2 questions. So one is, since you have other businesses, do you also have a community of other contributors or writers that you bounce ideas off of or run drafts by, or have that community to support your writing? And then secondly, do you plan out a series of contributed columns over time? I mean, or is it, oh my gosh, gotta write something this week, or something's really top of mind and you want to write it, versus you sort of have kind of an arc of your work for, say, a quarter or 6 months?
I wish I did. I wish I had a plan. It's always top of mind for me. I mean, I think others are better organized with it than I am, but that's what I want. I mean, it helps me, I guess, and it helps me think through stuff, and so that's how I do it. I mean, I think editors and I know my editor at CNBC would like to see a plan, and I get it, but it's not how I'm wired, or it's not how I don't have the bandwidth to sit down and think about a content calendar and what's gonna happen, what I'm gonna do 6 months from now. So I wish I did, but it doesn't play out that way for me. But I think it would be nice to have a little bit of a plan, but I don't.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's the same way. I would love to be organized in that side of thing, but it just doesn't happen. You're also running a business as much as you're writing. So yeah, a lot of times it's top of the mind. For me, a lot of my inspiration, also to address your first question, inspiration actually comes from talking to my customers, my existing customers, that they're describing the problems, talking to potential customers, having that, even if it's a sales conversation, they're just talking about the problems, and then those are things that we can go back and address. There are founders or the people that I'm coaching or advising, and during that conversation, suddenly you get that spark. This can actually turn into a column, so I go back and I write that column. So that's where I get inspiration from. But yeah, I would love to be more organized. It's
also a little bit intentional too. I mean, I'm trying to build a coaching business and build. You were talking about the competition and setting yourself apart. I mean, the directory of executive coaches is pretty long, and so I do want to write content that establishes me in that particular field and focus. And I try to focus, not always successfully, but I try to focus in on that, and so that if somebody's looking at, they're looking at a couple of coaches, and they see my content, and it sets me apart from them. So. There is that sort of strategy. So there is a strategy, but it's not a content strategy. It's more of a laser focus on developing thought leadership in that field and in that way. So, John, you had a question.
Is there anything in specific that certain publications do to attract your content more than other publications? For example, like, do you write for, have given up certain publications because of X? Or what would be best practices to attract someone like you?
Getting feedback. We were talking about that this morning. Ink's platform, I think, is the best I've seen so far in terms of helping the contributors. So they have a monthly. They get their top contributors to do monthly calls to tell them what they're dealing with and how to do better, things that have been successful for them, whether it be social media or. There was one a couple months ago on just writing headlines and titles. So there's a constant sort of education for the contributors. There's also, they have a contributor platform where you can go and you can find out how your posts are doing to the minute, your world page views, your US page views, and it's got a bunch of other data and analytics, where the page views are coming from, what platforms they're coming from, whether it's coming from Google or such. So that's extremely helpful. I mean, I think that could even be better, but it is a little bit, I mean, it gives you a little bit of data.
Right.
Right, and so that's the easiest platform to work on. But, you know, on the other side, you know, working with Success and CNBC, I feel like my content is better because I do have the conversation with an editor. There is a back and forth. And so I think the content that comes out of that is better content at the end than what I get from posting on an Anchor or another, which doesn't go through any process at all, right? So I think there's a back and forth, but I think the easier it is, the better, and it's more attractive.
I think what you're saying is also the more engaged a publication is with their contributors and helping them meet their goals and objectives, you tend to skew towards those publications because that's helping you produce better content eventually, right?
Right.
And then there are publications that are completely disengaged, and you know, you tend to see you don't necessarily tend to contribute or go there much
As often.
Yeah.
Right.